Good morning, team. How are we?
Morning.
Awesome. Morning, all.
Jack's chuckling because I'm like 20 minutes late. What have you been up to?
Yeah, Jack, how was your time up on the Gold Coast?
Oh, it was really good. Went Thursday to Tuesday, so it was good to get a bit of time away. But I was saying to Ash, like, you just forget how humid it is in Queensland. So I was quite happy to come back to the dry heat.
It has been muggy. What about you, Ash? How are things?
Yeah, good. We've had some very hot weather in SA, but dry heat. Yeah, nighttime beach swims. Been pretty good, really. I feel like this is the first summer, like proper summer I've had since I moved back. So I'm pleased with it. Can stick around for my mental health, which is nice.
The funniest thing I've read it was last night when I asked if you could start this episode a little later and you said, yeah, but I've got a tradesman coming in at an hour. And what I find funny is that you think that they're going to turn up on time.
Well, this guy is pretty good. So, or maybe he just like knows that I don't fuck around with time. Like I send him a calendar invite.
To the tradie. I love
To the
it.
tradie. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
Have you got a Notion page and a shared to-do list?
You laugh, but for my mum's renovations, I take notes and I record the conversation. So then they go, oh, no, we never spoke about that. I'm like, please see minute da-da-da-da-da. This was discussed. Here's where we got to. So now
You must be a lot of fun to live with.
Can we get Tim on?
Yeah, can we get some feedback?
I love it. You just need to productize it, Ash. Make that a service for people.
Yeah, that's a off-air conversation.
But what's that software that you used the other day again? Because it was Granola. It was referenced on the last 20 VC episode. But for anybody listening, Ash used Granola on one of our calls the other day. It just happens in the background secretly. And the summary...
I did tell you I was using it.
No, you disclosed it. But
you disclosed it. I'm saying, but you don't have to disclose it. And that's what I'm here for. Like, I like the idea of that. The actions and the summary, out of all the tools I've seen, that was the best.
Yeah, and Jack said it was good because he could click on one of the bullet points and then he could go to the transcript so he could get more context of what we said. So it's good for people who like aren't in a meeting as well, but you should also know that that's there so you can't shit talk anyone.
But it's so handy, like the fact that it doesn't need to be plugged into, like I don't need to authorize it in Zoom. You can just record. It's awesome.
Well, why don't we get in? We probably, especially me, have been talking about how the rise of AI means that outbound is dead, is a common narrative. And the reason that is just the sheer volume of the easy ability to create content. But it was actually a conversation I had with Vu Tran. And yeah, I think the podcast we did with Vu recently was one of the better ones we've done. But he's got another business that he's involved in, and we were having a bit of a chat about it. And he was just talking about the cold outbound calling that they're doing, the massive penetration they're getting, but ultimately why? Because they've got a product and a message that their ideal customer is immediately resonating with when they pick up the phone and listen. And I think they're converting 80% of cold calls and messages into a discussion. And I think that's the nuance that maybe we missed a little bit, that at no point will anything like that ever be dead. It's just going to be harder because there is such a river of crap being thrown out there. But if you've got the product and you've got the message, you'll get through. Yeah,
my takeaway from that one was if it's a burning problem that's understood by the customer and you speak to them in their language and the directness of how you shared of how he expresses that with a direct solution, direct benefit, it just got cut through and it was synced sharp to the point. And I think outbound is dead in the sense of the spam and the generic content and irrelevance, but good human connection that speaks to a problem that I'm experiencing with a direct solution cuts through.
And I'm going to again play a clip from a 20 VC episode. Last week's episode where we borrowed some information, I got a number of messages saying that part of the episode was the best. And if you just do that regularly, you might get some more listeners. So
good feedback.
Thank you. But I think outbound is dead for people that don't do it in this kind of way. So I'm going to play two videos that I think are helpful, because if you approach it this way, I think you'll be surprised. Okay.
Says to me on the show, the change in sales is that outbound in 2025 is dead.
That's crazy. That's crazy talk.
You strongly disagree.
Yeah. I strongly
You
disagree.
think cold calling still works?
Absolutely. But I'm really glad that other companies don't. And I hope a lot of those companies are our competitors.
Does AI change the effectiveness of outbound? When you think about supply, I can now send infinite emails, beautifully personalized with effective AI agents, tooling, data. Does that change outbound?
Yeah. I don't know that you can yet, but you will. I will grant you that you will. But really, the most effective means of pipeline generation is outbound cold calling, the human voice-based interaction over the phone. The emailing is, you do it, that softens the field. That creates some familiarity so that when they pick up the phone, they're like, oh, Harry, why does that sound familiar? And maybe they don't even know why it sounds familiar, but it sounds familiar because they've received a bunch of emails, and those emails had your name on it, and they they landed with some sort of a positive aura around them. So maybe I'll give you an anecdote. There was a sales rep who I love named David Boyle, and he was calling on Dun and Bradstreet, and Dave is an epic PGer. And so we were at a company, Oblix, and the pinnacle person to talk to at Oblix is the chief security officer, chief information security. We've got a meeting with the CISO at Dun and Bradstreet, and we're in the lobby. The CISO had like a lobby just for the CISO's office. This is a few years ago, and as we're waiting for the CISO, Dave is in the hall doing PG, leaving voicemails, pacing up and down the hall. He's looking every once in a while to see if his assistant has called us in. We go in, we meet the guy, and before we even start the meeting, he says, it must be nice to be able to just call a CISO like that and have him bring you in. You're welcome. So tell me about your product. So we go through the meeting, we tell him about the product, and on the way out, I was like, Dave, really? Just one call? It's like, that guy's got no idea. And he opens up his book and he shows me he had sent him 11 emails, 8 phone calls. He had become friendly with his executive admin. He convinced the admin to write a Post-it note and put it on his screen. Says, Dave from Oblix wants to meet with you because of XYZ. The guy was on another call, read that, nodded, and that's how we got the meeting. He had no idea about the 18 other touches that had preceded that. And so that's what happens. You have to break through the noise. People are getting lots and lots of, and so that's where email's good and social media and all the other things. But most meetings are set, like 2/3 are set as a cold call.
I think you are always underestimating the familiarity. You post 10 times a month on LinkedIn. Me responding to 5 of them, go Carlos, so awesome to see. After 5, you're like, oh, the name rings a bell. The name rings a bell. We have it with fans of the show where I'm like, I don't know what they do or who they are, but the name rings a bell.
It's cold calling, but not by itself. There's a lot of work that went into that.
A lot. And I think outbound, there's such a fixation on social media, on email, but like cold calling, voice, actually having meetings and building a relationship and familiarity and connection. Like ultimately, as we head into AI, this is going to be more and more valuable, real human connection.
I love the art of a cold call. I think it was like week 2 and we'd launched Squizify. And then I think for the next 2 weeks, I got up to 450 cold calls, just not once, not twice, 3 times. Then it's a text message. But before that, it was 1 email, 2 emails. There's some content on it.
I think in this day and age, people are going, oh, I sent them an email or I made 1 phone call. Like what's actually being described there is a pursuit of trying to understand, add value, but not giving up. And also I like the way he got to the executive assistant, like saying, okay, well, how else do I do it?
Admins. There's the one thing that working in a big corporate taught me was the EAs are probably the most powerful people in any building. Understanding what their coffee order is, how they work with their kind of executive. Like it's powerful to be able to tap into that network. Like we have an EA at 11.2 and she's worked at pretty much all of the big corporates across Adelaide. And so if we need to get to an executive, she has the fingers in every kind of EA pocket. And when we try to get a meeting, it's generally not one of us getting to the executive. It's her getting to an EA to get us in the door. It's go every angle you can to get through.
I think as well as standing out signal to noise, there's also ego at play. Like I think people like to see that you're hungry and like to see that you chase. I mean, I'll say especially with investors and LPs, like we've actually heard that feedback. They want to hear that you love a deal so much that you are chasing them and you are following up with them because you don't want them to miss it. And I think it's true of corporate execs if you're selling to enterprise. There's an element of ego in this as well as people just being busy or being saturated with so many comms.
Yeah. I also think like something to call out here for founders is depending on your own startup will depend on the go-to-market. So the video that we just watched, like that's going to be field sales door to door. But if you're selling something remotely via insider sales, like it's got to be a different playbook, and everyone's playbook is going to be individual, and you've got to work it out yourself what works. So like when we sit back here and say outbound's dead, like it's up to you to actually apply whether or not the channel's dead. And I think like there's a big difference between strategy and execution. Like we're very quick to say that the strategy's dead, but really it's probably just the execution. And I think Vu's a perfect example of that. Like we're all saying outbound's dead, but he's just proven like he executed and he's getting 80% hit rate. Like that's out of this world. And so it's just so important for the founders when you hear something like to actually go and apply it and see for yourself and do the reps, do the hard work. And even if that one strategy isn't working, like you can still pivot, still doing the same channel, but just pivot the strategy.
Jack, I think that's right. And it is nuanced. I'm going to play another video now because I think what's not nuanced is actually the work that you need to do before actually picking up the call or sending an email. So let me play this and let's have a chat about this next bit.
How do we form structure around it? Can you take me to Pipeline Generation Tuesdays? Like, what is that? How do you structure it?
Before I get into the weekly cadence, let's say for the quarter, I'm an enterprise salesperson. I might select from my territory 20 top targets for the quarter. And I'll sit down with my manager the first or second day of the quarter and I'll validate, hey, are these good? Yeah, no, you missed. This one's not very good. Great. Okay, now I've got 20 accounts that I'm going to go after over the next 3 months. On a given week, I'm going to focus on 1 or 2 accounts, maybe 3 if they're on the smaller side. So let's say an average of 2. I declare those on Thursday. Those are my focus accounts for next week. Thursday night, I declare them, which is just, I click a couple things in Salesforce. Now, over the course of Friday and over the weekend, as a salesperson, I do some research. What's the research? I look at what the execs are saying on social media. I read the 10K. Now you can use AI to make a lot of this stuff so much better. I research the company. I look at I look at their job postings. I look at what you might even go in looking blind and see what their engineers are saying, see what people are griping about. I try to get a sense for what's really going on inside the company. And then I develop a hypothesis about something that I think they care about that we can impact. Maybe I develop 2 or 3 hypotheses. This is for the account. Then I go in and I say, okay, let me come up with, let's say it's 2 account. Let me identify 25 human beings in that account that based on their title, based on their LinkedIn profile, I think are relevant to what I sell. And let me capture those 25 names, their email address, their LinkedIn. I'm going to check to see if I can find them on social media. And then I'm going to go into some database and find their phone numbers. So I've got their mobile numbers. Then and I do that for 2 accounts. So I've got 50 names. For my 10 most important people on those 50 names, I'm going to also now investigate the person. Have they been on a podcast? Have they written a book? Have they written a blog? What do they care about? And I'm going to develop a hypothesis or to a conversation starter for the top 10 of those people. Okay, that constitutes account PG prep.
Like in the example there's a lot of prep. Now, some companies will need more prep. Some companies will be a lot. But what I think I see quite often is that there's almost no prep. It's like, outbound is going to be just a cold call, or I'll set up an automated thing on LinkedIn and I'll just message the people about it. But what Vu and this other company and his teammates have done have actually really understood exactly who their ideal client profile is. They formed that hypothesis and now they're doing very targeted messaging. That's why it's working for them. In my view, whether you're enterprise sales or inside sales, too often we think that we can just automate our way out of it. We're actually, that level of prep and that scale and what he's talking about there is actually what you need to do in order to make the outbound strategy work.
Yeah, I think, Don, it's absolutely fair to say it's an execution issue more than a strategy.
100%. Like that is all execution.
Yeah.
That's all how. That's almost know what. That's like when we say outbound, how do you do it? Well, it's execution in that manner. Totally agree.
I love like listening to that clip. Like that is Adrian Di Marco. Like you listen to the podcast of Adrian and talk about the cadence. Like these enterprise sales teams are, like that are high performing are next level.
So I'll put the link to that episode. You've got to listen to the whole episode because what he describes is Thursday you declare, Friday marketing looks at what you've declared and tries to find some more information for you. Then on the weekend, you go and do it. Monday, you have a meeting with your manager and your team. Tuesday, as a team, you all do X, Y, and Z. Like it's so beautifully systemic, and it's what high-performing companies do.
There's a lot in that, like the structured approach, the fact that the amount of prep that goes into it. And I think you're spot on, Don. Like the number of founders we see that just go to the call sheet, pick up the phone, start talking, and they don't have that really concise approach already nailed out.
And I loved how you mentioned there, how you said sales works with marketing, or marketing works with sales to then drive demand. Like I love looking at like it shouldn't be siloed, and you're really trying to go back to how we're going to drive demand and then how we're going to convert it. And like that is two teams working together to drive demand, and then sales will help close.
Yeah, the thing that founders need to be mindful of though, like these are big enterprise companies who have people in all of these different functions. But if you are the sole salesperson, you just got to go and do it. You just got to figure it out. And you can still use that structured approach, but for yourself, it helps you stay accountable. And I think that is the hardest thing in being a salesperson in a startup is you don't have as many checkpoints and accountability points. And so the grit and drive to continue to do that on a week by week basis, you've got to create that accountability for yourself. Even if it is just saying to the founder, hey, every week can we sit down and you just need to ask me these 3 questions to make sure that I'm staying on track. You just have to work out with your sales function and your marketing function. How can we have the execution of an elite team at the top level, but on our budget and with the people we currently have? And it might be that you need someone else in the team to help that grit and drive because it's hard. Cold calls are hard. Even getting in the door is hard. But look, I get excited when I listen to things like that. It's fun.
Now, Jack, before you cleared your throat, now the listeners will never know that because the effort I go to in editing, I would just like to point out, I do a better job editing this podcast than Harry does of 20VC because the amount of throat clearing and ums. So I just want to bathe myself in a little bit of justification glory there because that drives me insane.
I actually picked up on that, Don. I thought maybe you could just leave them in, save yourself the heartache.
This is Success Leaves Clues, the greatest VC podcast in the world doesn't bother going and doing those things, but I think it's just the little details. Maybe it's because I'm the one that's generally clearing my throat and I'm quite self-conscious about it. But anyway.
Well, on that point, Success Leaves Clues. I know we've been talking a lot about doing this founder survey, which is more focused on like the holistic level and founder behaviors. But just note, like Harry's looking fit and sharp. Like there's some signals there around performance. He's wearing his rugby shorts, but his quads are pretty huge.
Yeah, he said every Saturday he walks a marathon with his mum.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
I think I'm going to have a look at this.
Oh, God.
Have I become Harry? Have a look at his shirt. Look at my shirt.
Now we find out why Don was late to the call. He was madly rushing to buy a shirt.
Like, is this? I didn't plan this, but if you live with someone that limps, you start to limp yourself.
You got the whoop on as well.
Oh, that is the spot on. Spot on. Are you wearing the red short rugby shorts as well?
No, I don't have the legs for that. Well, I'm going to put the link to the whole episode in that because what I'm doing for our portfolio is I've thrown that episode into Descript and made about 10 individual videos and then going to make a little course out of it because a couple of portfolio are currently having to replace their sales manager because they just haven't been that systemic. And like there's a playbook there, even at the interviewing stage. Like if you ask what is your approach to sales leadership and they don't feed you back something that smells like what is discussed in this podcast, you have a problem. And often what happens is founders tend to go, oh, they were a great salesperson. They're the best salesman. I'm going to put them in sales leadership. Actually, it's someone generally who wants to be a good salesperson, but lacks the personality to do it, but understands system thinking. So they understand sales. They just can't do it themselves, but they can drive a sales process. That's actually the best sales manager.
Just one more thing to note as well, Don. Like after you guys got back from the US, I could see it in your eyes. Like you guys had seen these high performing teams. And I think it's so important for Aussie founders. Let me just clear my throat, Don. I think it's so important for Aussie founders to go over there and actually see like what in the US, like these high performing teams, because it is so crazy. Like the level is so different.
Oh, not just founders, investors too. Like to know what great looks like.
And it's not that like it's definitely not that Aussies like we can't get there. 100% we can get there, but it's just seeing that like it's being put in a professional team and just learning and just sitting and soaking it all up.
Yes.
I don't want to.
It knows what good looks like. You have to know what you're striving for. And until you know where the bar is on a global stage, I think like Aussies are by far some of the best elite executioners. No, that sounds bad. I'll go again. Aussies are some of the best performers on a global stage, but it's the ones who know where the global bar is for me that stand out.
I don't want to be too dramatic about it, but that last US trip, it's like life before that trip, life after that trip. Like it
100%.
is serious, like across, even talking with one of the portfolio yesterday, because when we came back, we really pushed AI. We got Duncan on board. We've been helping the portfolio. The feedback was, thank you so much for what you've pushed us doing. If you hadn't done that, I wouldn't be doing the things that we're doing now. And that's across the whole spectrum of stuff. It just, you can't help but raise your eye line and go, my prior ambition just wasn't where it needed to be. And I need more tight blue shirts.
But it's so true. And founders hear that. Like, Glenn Richards talks about it all the time. You've got to lift your line of sight as a founder because you so head down the business. But it's so easy to hear those kind of throwaway lines and not actually understand it. But I agree with you. The US mission for me, it's and as someone that regularly goes to Silicon Valley, it's still that reminder you have to go frequently and have these experiences to stay up to speed and on top of your game.
Yeah. This wasn't so much news in the traditional sense, and but it when I read it, it hurt me a little bit. This was a post by Ruchi Sanghavi. She posts, the worst thing that can happen to your startup isn't failure. It's succeeding at building something small after taking venture funding. Capital is a commodity. There's no end of investors willing to gamble on a decent idea. The capital is already committed. They have to invest it somewhere. Decent is good enough for them. But for you, it might be the next decade of your life. Time is your most precious asset. Some founders take the wrong lesson from this obvious truth. They think it's about the time they are losing now and ignore the much larger span of their life they might lose in the future. The most tragic companies aren't those ones that fail fast. They're the ones that succeed just enough to trap talented founders for years, making enough progress to stay alive, but never achieving escape velocity. The irony, good ideas are more dangerous than bad ones. When I've read that, that is so true. One of the most painful things when you're supporting founders is the ones that are stuck at that level, that if there was a different sliding door, if there was a different thing in life and they were in a slightly different business, they would be in a different position in life.
100%. I think this is true of so many things in life too. Like mediocrity or good is the enemy of great. Like it's just good enough, but it's not scaling, it's not performing well. And it can happen to a good founder in the wrong bloody thing. And to your point, Don, like we see this all the time, like bloody quality founder, but just tackling something that is ultimately a small business or a small market.
They care about, but the world doesn't.
Exactly. It's so true. Taking capital and not growing. Like it's, and I think it's a good watch out for founders, like that reminder that there's nothing wrong with building a comparatively small business that's not a unicorn, but generates free cash and you can live happily ever after. I think there is a bit of indexing to capital raising as some metric of success for founders or a rite of passage. And it doesn't have to be that way. I think really understanding your own personal goals, but understanding the business that you're in and taking that time. I love what Adrian Di Marco says, like zoom out, look at the big picture, take your time to build a high quality business. And it doesn't mean moving slow, but it means making decisions with that long-term lens.
Yeah, I think Jack and I talk about this quite a bit because I feel like in the South Australian ecosystem in particular, there is this headset of if you don't raise capital, you're not being successful. But there is also, because there are less founders, they are so focused on making their business go and be successful versus just going, you know what, I am a high quality founder, but this isn't right. It's that we're not getting the right signals from the market. We're not getting the right signals from investors. I need to go and pivot into a new business. And I feel that in the ecosystem in South Australia, that's a conversation that isn't had with a lot of confidence. And so that's something that I know Jack and I have talked about a number of times, just having met founders every few weeks here, just having similar conversations about, oh, we've been able to grow at 1 or 2% or 5% or 10%. You're not seeing these bell curves, which you need for VC style investments.
No, I don't really have anything to add for this one, Don.
Yeah, well, one thing that is news, and I think you could say, given the growth that they're achieving, is they're not falling into that trap at the moment, is that a Sydney startup that sells artificial intelligence to some of the country's biggest technology companies has banked a $100 million valuation. That company is Lorikeet. I did have a little bit of a chuckle because I think the biggest investor coming in was Blackbird. So the Blackbird now has a Lorikeet.
I didn't even think of that. That's so good.
I did not make that connection.
under its wing, but this is an article by Amelia Maguire. It was founded in 2023 by Steve Hine and JB Hall, who formerly worked with Stripe and Google respectively. I think when you talk about founder problem fit, this is the kind of thing we talk about, because what's occurred is they had some experiences inside Stripe and Google that has then led them to this.
I guess the thing that pops into my mind and what I find really important is that I do like when we have a sovereign based company in some of these fields. I think it's a growing thing that I'm keeping tabs on. Is we don't want to have everything offshore. We want to make sure that we have the ability to keep our sovereign capability and see some of these companies really get to market and do well, but also be there as a sovereign source of protection and a layer of security for the country. So I think it's so important to see companies like this not only get capital, but get customers. And we all know that customers are the hardest thing to acquire. And so the fact that you've got big companies in Australia bringing in businesses like this versus offshore, I think that's something that we should all be proud of as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Ash, is, we've heard a lot about capital raising for AI ventures, and the data showing there's a lot of capital flowing in, but we haven't seen the correlation to revenue growth. And it's good to see something that's selling to a larger customer segment, larger size company customer that's actually getting strong revenue growth. So that AI adoption curve actually demonstrating that there is a value prop there that's being understood by the market.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. One of the things we're also seeing is, I don't know about you, but the speed of robotics in the last 6 months, what we're seeing online has just seemed to have gone exponential. And I think we're about to see robotics really enter the world of functionality. And this one's a bit of a silly one because it's robots dancing. But let me just play this. We don't need the sound, but just the dexterity, the ability to mimic human movement, and do that at scale. I can just see it. It's pretty well here, isn't it?
Pretty much, like Moore's law is playing true. Computers and robotics and all technology just keeps doubling every 12 to 18 months in terms of power, in terms of halving in price, in terms of becoming half the size. And so this is a good example of a visual representation of the exponential, which is so hard for humans to wrap their heads around. And like we say on pretty much every episode ever, this is as bad as this technology will ever be today. It's just going to continue that exponential curve of capability. I showed this to my daughter this morning, and her first question was, why? As in, why do we need dancing robots? But then as
you don't have... Yeah.
Well, as we talked about it, she got more excited about the concept of robots coming into the home and those sort of things, whereas I do have a little touch with these of thinking of defense and other repercussions. But it's phenomenal to see how much has changed in a short period of time.
Well, as I shared, the caravan park flooded again. Note to self, try not to buy assets in a cyclone and flood prone area. But anyway, but in the not too distant future, there isn't really going to be the panic and the whatever else, because we'll sit back and then our 2 gardening type robots are going to have the program to go and hose everything out, clean the pool out,
But won't
deconstruct.
they have died in the flood? Like,
No, well, they will have gone to higher ground. They'll be
with no
stored in the shed.
no battery source?
No, they'll have little ash.
That-
They'll have
That is
little
bit-
hydrogen fuel cells, Ash.
They would have died in the flood. That's
No,
that's
no,
all
no.
I have in my
Well, even at home, you should see the disgraceful job I've done on one of the hedges. Like, I'm embarrassed because the cut is on the angle. But part of me is like, in not too distant future, I'm not going to have to worry about that because I'm just going to have my gardening robot cruising around, keeping everything in place. Tell me I'm wrong.
No.
I don't think you're wrong on that one, but I don't see how your gardening robots would have survived the flood.
Right.
They could be deployed after.
Yeah, but like he's saying as if it's just like gone to a higher ground. Like if it goes to a
No, but we literally have higher ground. I don't have like one flat paddock. Like there's a hill. I have higher ground.
But won't the power be off? So how's it going to charge?
No, there's we're gonna have to sit down and I've got a big battery plant up there. It'll
No,
do
that's-
push-ups to power itself through
This
the
is-
power of
this is
movement.
when the dyslexic brain is like, absolutely not. This is not. I don't see this. No.
We're gonna have the tribe offsite at this 2.5-star
going to the
caravan
tribe?
park.
Have you cleared that with Aaron? I thought we
We
had
will.
that training.
No, I'm down for it. Be awesome. We can have might need some life rafts and
Well, let's try and get this thing back on track. Now, from an investment point of view, I don't actually see a lot of excitement in the hardware and the robots themselves, because what we keep seeing is that a commodity product subject to competition, the marginal profit always goes to zero. And if you look at like the airline industry, that has done so much for humanity, but such competition that always drives that marginal profit down. That's where things like Hamilton Helmer's 7 powers come into it, because by all means, if you're going to go down the hardware, is there one of the 7 powers that you can also add to the ecosystem? Now, the 7 powers, as a reminder, are scale economies. So you can just build these so much faster and cheaper than anyone else, and no one can compete with you. Like switching costs, once your hardware is in, once your robots are in, it's very hard to actually change them to some others. Like cornered resource, you've got some IP or some technology or patents that no one else can get access to. Counter positioning, so you're more nimble than big competitors. Branding, which to me, nothing we ever look at really has the branding power because it's too early. Networks effects is a big one. So every piece of hardware that gets added, the network gets more value, or finally process power. That's what I think people need to not forget, that if you're going to jump on some great new technology or new trend, how am I actually going to get a durable competitive advantage? Because that's the only place to make margin.
100%.
This is your world, Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go,
But yeah,
Jack.
that's something just to add there, Don. It's just make margin over the long term. And like the game we're in is like a 10-year time horizon. So you've got to be thinking and playing the long game. And to protect your margin, you need a defensible competitive advantage.
Yeah, leveraging these to build pricing power. Just on that point, Jack, you said, just thinking of one of the conversations with one of our portcos recently, margin alone isn't sufficient if your price point is so low that even with 90+% of what you're charging out at, you're still making crumbs. So understanding that you've actually got to model these things out beyond the metric just of margin. Yeah, to your point, Jack, like using the Helmer 7 powers to identify how can you build pricing power in the future.
Yeah. Like what you don't want to be in a position is where your margins are eroding. So like taking away whatever you're making now, like you want your margins to stay steady and healthy over the long term. Otherwise, competitors are coming into the market, undercutting you. And then ultimately the end user is just paying a cheaper price. Like you don't want to be in that market. That's a bad dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a sure ticket to getting into trouble.
We don't only invest in B2B tech companies, we also run missions over to the US and the UK, as well as offsite, which we open up to the broader ecosystem. That's founders, that's investors.
Our missions are about taking founders and investors into the UK and US markets so that, one, they can understand what it takes to scale into those markets and set up shop in those markets, but also to see over the horizon into the latest tech, how capital's being allocated so that they can come back home and transform and scale their business.
Yeah, I like the way we put on panels of founders that have been there and done it, panels of investors. So then that way they get some time pitching to US or UK investors, the channel partners that we put them in touch with. It's really trying to get them into market so they can establish exactly what they need to do in order to scale a really great business over there.
Yeah, we really prioritize this not being tech tourism or something that you could simply YouTube or Google or GPT the answer to from home. It's really about experiencing and immersing in these environments where you viscerally experience scale. You get to understand disruption and how these technologies are actually being applied in market, and therefore how you can navigate and build a scalable business into those markets.
If this is something of interest, shoot us a DM. And enough of that, back to the podcast.
Now, this whole AI is revolution, and both at the software, the robotics level, is not going to come without some pain. And there was a video uploaded. Amazon, who's often one of the first ones to adopt a lot of this stuff, in one of their warehouses made 400 people redundant. I'll just play this. So if you just look at the way robots, like they're humanoid, are actually doing the work that humans were doing in these fulfillment centers, it makes a lot of sense. But all of this change isn't going to come with some pain. And whilst people listening are probably in that situation, I don't think it's any different to founders and their companies and investors in their portfolio companies being replaced very quickly and having almost no business.
Yeah, I love this post.
Sorry,
you go, Jack.
sorry. No, I was just going to say that video is wild to us.
The bit I picked up from it, I think it's relevance. Relevance isn't given, and it's also it decays. Like, it has a half-life. And what we're seeing with Moore's law and the exponential growth in these technologies is that half-life is decaying. So relevance is something that has to be continually re-earned, and therefore it becomes a capability, like a competence in actually building relevance and maintaining relevance is really important. And that's why, Don, so much of the work you do with a portfolio and at the offsites and missions for others is around building that capability to continually improve while the external world is changing. Because even if you have nailed everything internally, shit changes, and the reward for your growth is just more problems, but also the rest of the world is growing independent of you. And so relevancy, it's great when you're there and you feel it and you get that market pull, but man, that decays super fast, and it's just going to continue to accelerate the rate at which that decays.
Yeah, and I think relevancy is also being clear on what you are. And there was a video with Mark Andreessen, and he's talking about how they look at this AI environment, how they see it rolling out.
The companies that we see are basically one of two kinds. We see the companies that are basically sometimes use weak form, strong form. So the weak form companies, I sometimes use the term, it's called the sixth bullet point. AI is the sixth bullet point of whatever they're doing.
Sure.
Right. And it's on the slide, right? So they've got the whatever, dot, 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 and then AI is the sixth thing. And the reason AI is the sixth thing is because they had already previously written the slide before the AI revolution started. And so they just added the sixth bullet point on the slide, which is how you're getting all these products that have like the AI button up in the corner, right? The little sparkly button.
Yep.
Right. And all of a sudden Gmail is offering to summarize your email, which I'm like, I don't need that. Like, I need you to answer my email, not summarize it. Like, what the hell? Okay, so we see those, and that's fine. That's like, I don't know, putting sugar on the cake or something. But then we see the strong form, which is the companies that are building from scratch for AI, right? And they're building it. I actually just met with a company that is building literally an AI email system as an example. So just
nice. I can't wait.
Yeah, they're going to completely right. So the very obvious idea, very smart team. It's going to be great. And then Notion, just another, not one of our companies, but just came out with a product. And so now companies are going to basically come through, sweep through, and they're going to do basically AI first versions of basically everything. And those are like companies built AI as the first bullet point. It's the strong form of the argument.
Yeah, I like that categorization of weak form, strong form. Where does it fit? But I do want to remind people that you don't have to be an AI first company, but it's how are you actually leveraging it to not just, like, I like that example of the email. Don't summarize the email for me, reply to the bloody thing.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of that. And even just the conversations that we're having every week together, I think it's learning how to adapt and continue to evolve and continue to learn where AI can make you more efficient, make you better at your job. That really makes a difference. And I think that's like that you can take that thinking to founders and go, right, if you already have a good product in market, you've got product market fit, it's not about hitting pause and building AI first. It's how can you continue to evolve your product, or do you need to look at a different market or a segment of how you can evolve and utilize the skill sets and tools that are out there now? For me, it's just even every day I'm like, well, is my job going to be at risk? And so it's like, no, it's about how do you leverage it? How do you become better? How do you be more efficient? Or what, if you think back to that sales process we were talking about, what part of that can I automate? Can I sit there and be strategic about those 10 investors I want to get in front of in the next 2 weeks? And then can I have AI help me build that research? And so I'm not spending 5 hours doing research. I'm spending an hour learning and analyzing the research to then be informed without having to take 6 hours to do something I can do in an hour. I think for me that it's always trying to think about how to progress and utilize the new things that are coming.
Yeah, one little nuance I'd add to that too, for founders who are building, even if they are AI led, asking that question, which we've talked about in previous episodes, around, is what I'm building essentially going to be a feature set of someone else's product who already owns the customer? And so what I like about this little video is like completely rewriting email as an AI first approach, rather than doing something that, because we've seen this with a lot of AI companies, they're targeting something super niche, they're leveraging AI and great, but essentially it could be just added as a feature of someone else's product that already owns the customer, that already has that market advantage. So, but yeah, I think the key point here is prioritization of AI capability, understanding, and experimentation. I've found as you've got to be bumping that up your list.
With all of this AI, robotics, and the power, we're actually going to have to power everything. And I went to a thing last Friday that my father had found through a friend of his, and he took me to. It was the 2023 winner of the Miss America pageant, is also a nuclear scientist, as it turns out, and is doing tours of Australia for an entity called, I think, Nuclear Australia that Dick Smith is actually funded. And Dad and I went to this on Friday night. I must admit, I was expecting 40 randoms in a room. There was like, I think 400 or 500. And I did take a little video because I want to get to one point, but there are a lot of people that don't like nuclear power, and I'm trying to learn a little bit more, but there's a point to why I'm sharing this. But this was some of the protesters and the event.
Tell your story, walking foul.
So
crack over an event. What a way to spend a Friday night with your old man.
It was actually a lot of fun. Although being in Wollongabba at like 9 or 10 at night, then going out afterwards was like, I felt so old so quick.
Can we appreciate the tell your story walking power? That is such a good comment.
So here's I didn't know what else to say. I needed to contribute to the conversation. It's a good call out, Jack, because it's not very respectful. But here's the problem. They were sitting in the audience and they would just get up every now and then and start screaming. You had no idea what they were actually saying, what their position was, what their concern was. Just randomly, they jump up and just start yelling and carrying on. And so by the time the fifth person had done this, everyone's just like, oh, come on. Can you bugger off, please? But there's two things. One, I think we do need to have the nuclear discussion because I just don't know how we're going to power all this stuff, because base load is a real thing. Now, if your position in life is that actually humans should totally decrease their footprint and we should just have all renewables, and if we can't live within that, then stop having babies and reduce the population. That's one position. I don't subscribe to that position. But if we're going to actually try and improve the human condition and try and get AI and robotics and whatever else to actually improve things, we're going to have to power it. And with I think, given Australia's landmass, nuclear is an option. If one part of the debate only wants to turn up and yell and scream and carry on, your brain just switches off. It's like, well, I'm not even going to engage in the conversation with you then, because that's pointless. I think it's important. It's not so much what you think, it's about how you go about the disagreement, how you go about articulating and how you go about engaging in a conversation. Otherwise, you can't actually move forward.
Yeah, I definitely think, I definitely think nuclear
Boo, shoo.
I think nuclear is the way forward. That's my personal view. I think there's something in this too around renewables and coal plants versus nuclear, where I think there's something about the human's ability to look at like short-term incremental damage versus one-off damage. Like if you look at the impact of a, say, nuclear reactor meltdown, for example, it's very visceral, it's very real, it's a high impact versus the slow burn, like boiling a frog, of carbon just constantly being pumped into the atmosphere. I think humans have this disconnect between pain and downside when it's in small form versus a potential one-off macro, even if the risk profile is completely different, like the likelihood is completely different.
How many nuclear reactors have melted down?
2 that I can think of.
How many
Like
nuclear
Japan.
reactors are there globally?
I actually don't know the answer. And this is where I feel uninformed.
But this is part of the challenge, right? There isn't a conversation to understand it. And maybe it's not the way to go, but every one of the speakers on the panel talked about the need to have renewables. They're all very pro renewables, but there's this component of baseload, like how are we going to deal with that? And parts of the world now, because they do have nuclear, what you find is innovation comes and actually more and more stuff is able to be done with the waste. So the waste is actually becoming less and less. I wanted to ask the question, like with rocket technology the way it is, why don't we just shoot it into space and let Martians deal with it? But I just wasn't ready to express that level of stupidity, I guess. But tell me, is that the dumbest idea? Like, unless you believe that there are other planets, which maybe there are, what?
I think the risk would be nuclear materials being airborne in the atmosphere in the event of a rocket failure on launch, which could be pretty catastrophic.
All right, use a big slingshot or something.
A space elevator. No, but in all seriousness, we have to be looking at energy. If you look at AI and the data centers and the need there, you look at robotics, you look at what they're talking about in advancements in health in terms of longevity of humans and our energy use in that context, we have to be ramping up the energy production. It's going to become the inhibitor to all those things.
I can get one of my colleagues from 11.2 who's highly educated in the energy space on a potty if we want to actually dive into that.
Let's do it. And I'll track down some protesters and we'll do it properly.
Yeah.
This is the thing. There was no, I don't understand what their position was because it got lost.
I think it's
in the
also
noise.
hard, if you are uneducated in the audience and so you're there trying to learn, and so you're trying to learn pro and con. So you're listening to what they're saying, going, okay, well, what should I be taking away from their point of view versus them just going, this is bullshit. So I think it also depends of when you're in the audience, what you're trying to get out of both sides. So I think you were there obviously with an open mind, Don.
Well, also to add some relevance to Don's Friday night for founders, looping back to where we started today's episode, standing in front of a room and screaming loudly isn't enough to get cut through. And so in terms of outbound, the clarity of your messaging, the engagement, which is two-way with your audience, is critical. Otherwise, you're just a protester shouting whatever it is they were shouting.
Yeah, Don, I think there's a good LinkedIn post there about what you learned about B2B sales.
Yes. Yes. Always tell your story while you're walking. All right. I'm mindful about time. I wanted to just do a shout out. Adrian Di Marco, who's one of our shareholders and venture partners, a massive supporter, not only of Tribe, but of the ecosystem, was awarded an OAM.
Yeah. OAM.
Was awarded a OAM in the Australia Day Honours.
Yeah, Medal of the Order of Australia for his service to information technology, and bloody well earned. I've known Adrian a while, and he backed me as a sponsor of Startup Catalyst to help take Australian youths over to Silicon Valley, and and have them experience that cultural transformation that we talk about going through when we go on our missions. His back tribe, he's a bloody good bloke who just gives his time so generously when he could be doing anything else. So yeah, well earned.
The early stage of a VC is as close to a charity as you can get anyway. So he's...
You get the tax write-off.
Yeah. But without wanting to... Australia just can't help but cut people down, though, and especially the AFR. So Adrian not only stepped down from CEO and from the board of Tech One. Hasn't got any operational involvement, right? The Tech One employees who love him, the executive decided to take out an ad in the AFR to thank Adrian for his service to the community. The AFR writes an article saying he was the CEO, which he's not, and that effectively he instructed his marketing department to do it, and then puts an article in the rear window mocking him. So it's just amazing that Australians and the media, and you wonder why we have such dislike and distrust for parts of the media when they factually get it wrong, and then the article is just to cut down somebody that has done a lot of good for the ecosystem. So anyway,
for our listeners in the US and elsewhere, when you hear us talk about tall poppy syndrome in Australia, that article just sums it up 100%. The sole purpose is to chop someone down at a moment when they've been given an award, and just contains factual inaccuracies. So not only poor intent, but poorly executed.
Yeah, there's a 4 quadrant there somewhere. It's like intent and execution, and bottom left for that one. Now, I'm mindful just in case Ash's tradie does turn up on time, and if they do, they should get a OAM just for that.
I think Ash should get it for managing to get the tradie to show up on time.
I mean,
True.
Jack has dealt with this tradie. He's good.
So
you got Dave coming. Yeah. Dave's quality.
Yeah.
We'll be
Okay.
there.
Well, Ash, do you want to kick us off with your theme of the week? Just in case you have to leave early.
yeah.
I now that I think about it, Ash finds the Sharts section so difficult to emotionally get through. She's made up a reason to get out early.
Well played, Ash.
It's so hard for me, honestly. Yeah, my theme of the week is putting together a data room. Like, obviously, we have spent a lot of time over the years going into founders' data rooms and learning how they've done it to really get an understanding. But building the data room for the Tribe Captive Fund launch has been a really great exercise, and just really putting myself back in the customer user journey to think about how can I logically lay things out. So I've been really in this kind of like UI UX headspace, and so really trying to brush up on those skills to make sure that the user journey for our process is as smooth and I guess easy to follow, and just a good narrative that makes sense, and we have enough information without overwhelming people. All of those kind of nuances that founders go through. So if anyone has any tips and tricks to beautiful crafting data rooms, please let me know.
You've done an excellent job.
I was going to say, Ash, you've done a masterclass on the data room.
I was zoning out in a meeting on Tuesday, and I was just waltzing through the data room, and I learnt many things about our humble little company.
That's good. Well, let's see the dollars come in, and then we can say it was great.
Yeah. So my theme of the week, I feel like, Don, we've had a few portcos, a bit of a roller coaster at the moment, and something like, to touch on Adrian, something he spoke about in the podcast was like, you can't get help unless you put your hand up, and burying your head in the sand will never help. I just think it's like a constant reminder for founders, investors, whoever. Like, there's always going to be up and down, but you can't get help unless you put your hand up, and that's the first step. And it's just such a good reminder.
Totally. And it's part of why I think we share some of our difficult personal stories. And so our role is to always make sure that they feel that they can raise anything at any time.
Jack, that is such a good one. And just to add to that, we want to hear the problems. We want to hear the shit bits. We want to hear the authentic reality, and we want to hear it way up front. And surprises in this game are damaging. So and for a founder to flip that, like, when you have a problem, your shareholders have a vested interest in solving this with you. And so sharing the problem with them, you're actually adding the computational brainpower of all those individuals, plus their networks, plus their past experiences to help solve the problem. And this kind of comes back, my little reflection of the week is, it sounds a bit random, but inner child work, and it comes from something Maren did on the weekend, but actually doing that work to understand why it is we get stuck in our heads or our thinking of why we behave in certain ways. And in these kind of moments, to Jack's point, like, why don't we share these problems that we're going through with others? And I think it's really critical, even if you don't think you have an inner child, or you don't think you've got this work to do, or there's no problems, bloody guarantee you've got things going on in your program behavior that are playing out for you in ways you're more than likely not aware of. And so shout out to Don, mate, for the work you've done and encourage others to do, and for the intro you made for Maren, because this stuff is transformational.
Very proud of Maren. Well, mine, like, I've often had a bad habit of trying to make sure that the other person understands what it is that I'm saying. And actually, in some situations, you've actually just got to let that go, and you've actually got to back yourself. And trying to convince somebody why you're right actually can often harm both of you. And so often you've got to actually make a decision to either back yourself. And you could be wrong, but there's so much time and effort, I think, that gets lost in going, oh, I'm going to try and convince, I'm going to try and convince. And there's just been a number of times where actually I've just paused and gone, no. There's no convincing here. This is what you believe in. This is the direction. And then you need to just live by the consequences and not make any excuses after that. But I think you do a disservice for some situations where you want to flip-flop and only move forward if the other person agrees with the way you see the world, and that's not actually going to be possible.
One could argue the anti-nuclear protesters were following your advice, Don. I was trying to convince.
The rabbit hole this morning, alas.
Sorry, say that again?
The rabbit hole you went down this morning.
Yeah, different situation. I was trying to learn.
No, but it's a good one.
1 minute for Sharts.
Okay, I'm a little bit poorly prepared, so you've not actually got them in there. So I'm going to share this screen. Now, this one is in French, and the problem is I've forgotten to write down the notes of what it means.
You're testing the 4 years I did of French, but remembered nothing.
Can we please get Ash's thoughts on this one?
C'est la merde.
I'm praying the doorbell goes off any second.
Well, I know that squiggly one is the S&P 500. I can spot that chart a mile away. And then CAC 40, I'm pretty sure that's the French index.
Right,
I think
John, that's not, because CAC 40 is the squiggly lines. Then that would be the S&P. They're two different blues.
Okay. All right. So next one. Can you see this? This is NVIDIA daily market cap change. You can look how this is getting more and more volatile. And January 27th was the largest single day decline of any company in history, which was nearly 600 billion. But like, we've had 600 billion now, but just wait till the future. It's just getting, it's getting wilder and wilder. And so for those at home, in 2016, their market cap change hardly even resonates, but just the size of the swings are getting bigger. Now, growth in a lot of these companies has always been a cyclical thing. So this is a chart going back to 2011 showing Meta and their year-on-year revenue growth. In 2011, it was over 100% and then came down to 32% in like 2012, went back up to 71% in 14, down to 38%, up to 60%, down to 44, up to 50. In the bottom of COVID, it was down as low as 10, but then shot up 55. It then had its first contraction in September 22. And we remember what the public markets did in 22. It then swung back up to 27%. And so it's going to be interesting to see if we now have another contraction like it's done in prior cycles.
My tradie's here, so I have to go.
2 minutes late. All right, Ash, I'll finish these and we'll see you next one.
Then back.
So, yeah, sounds good. Wait, Don, you're right if I jump off as well? I just got my grandfather waiting for me.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, cool. He's just waiting to get a few tools off me.
All right, fella.
Cheers, guys.
See you, Jack.
Mate. And then the final chart actually is, I don't know if this is happening in Australia, but this is a chart of the homes sold. Like, this is the days that it takes for homes to sell. And so it peaks in like February in the US. It falls in June and then it creeps back up into Christmas. But January this year is actually the highest that it's starting at. And so what this chart is showing is that houses are taking longer and longer to sell, even though there is a cycle throughout the year. My gut feel is that it's happening in Australia because I'm just seeing still a lot more stock and things take a little bit longer. But you're the one that's been out, Aaron, looking at places. So things seem to be sitting on the market longer.
Yeah, they are. They definitely are. And there's stuff that we've been looking at end of last year that got taken off market and has just been relisted, and now they're throwing them into auctions. So there's a lot of stock just not shifting, and it seems to be across price points, like from 3 mil properties down to 1.5. It seems pretty consistent.
Yeah, and that it'll be interesting to see if it picks back up. But Australia, given we are so property obsessed, that often is the driver of large parts of the economy, which inevitably does flow into our portfolio. Hence why I do like to look at these things just to understand the direction we're heading.
Yeah, it definitely impacts our LPs, like the investor appetite. But yeah, a lesson there for founders too. It's interesting watching real estate agents. You can tell the market is turning down when the comms from agents and the follow-ups and the engagement and the phone calls, they're so proactive. And now like pre-launching, whereas at the peak of the cycle, you can barely get in touch with them, don't return your calls. And so for founders, like that consistency of sales motion is really important. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I just realized I forgot one that I was going to put into the Sharts section, which then just talks to why I may be excited for this weekend. But this book here, sorry, it's your problem now because I'm dead.
End of life planner. Jeez. Oh, there's a lot in that.
The reason why I have that is, are you proud of me that you are not aware that I'm doing another half Ironman this weekend?
Mate, I'm impressed.
The problem is I've done bugger all training and I have felt the need to make sure that my usernames, passwords, I'm going to send you a loom on how this podcast is edited. I'm going to make sure that you've got all of the things because I'm in that problematic category that you read about. But anyway, I did like that book and I had to get it. It's like, it's your problem now. I'm dead.
Look, I was in the Garmin app and noticed that your training had dropped off. I'm like, I wonder if he's still doing that. That's coming up soon.
I think I keep a reasonable enough base load.
Well, you've proven time and time again your ability to get it done. I'm sure you'll be absolutely fine, and no doubt probably set some sort of freakish PB at the same time. So,
what are you looking forward to?
Well, we have a catch up today with the US mission participants. So it's going to be interesting to hear where they're all at and how they're tracking post trip. So looking forward to that, and then catching up with some of the New Zealand government folks that are out this afternoon for a coffee. They've got some companies that they want us to take a look at. So I'll be there for that as well.
All right, buddy. I'll see you later.
Thanks, mate. Have a good one.